people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Some comments from the current reigning undisputed super featherweight champion, Alicia Baumgardner, who said, Michaela Mayer and I have unfinished business, and Christina Linardatou for that bullshit split decision blemish on my record. So after she beats you, I'm coming for her first. Then I'm trying to end your career. We've talked about these comments in reference to a Mayer versus Baumgardner rematch. We have. But what about a Baumgardner versus Linardatou rematch? Christina Linardatou caught wind of these comments and stated, Alicia, after I beat Michaela, I would be more than happy to whoop your ass again and make your face look worse than this. A lot of people want to see Alicia run it back with Michaela. In truth, I do too, but I wouldn't mind seeing Alicia run it back with Christina as well. I do feel like they have unfinished business. It's not a coincidence that Christina Linardatou, a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, an explosive one, was able to dish out Alicia Baumgardner her first professional loss. Alicia, a pure boxer.
She is pure.
We often talk about the three principal base styles in the sport of boxing and which base styles have advantages over which other base styles. In this situation, a pressure fighter often has a stylistic advantage over a pure boxer because of their aggression and volume, the pace at which they wish to fight a fight. A pure boxer wants to fight at a slow, controlled pace, and a pressure fighter, they won't let them. They'll stand their face all night, forcing the issue, forcing them to trade, forcing them to fight. Years ago, Alicia Baumgardner and Christina Linardatou met for the first time. Alicia was a much younger fighter in those days, more green. In the fight, you saw what I'm talking about, how a pure boxer wants to fight at a safe distance, and the pressure fighter, their advantage is that they won't allow them to. They won't let them. They'll consistently force the issue, close the distance. They're not just trying to get close enough to land shots, you understand. Pressure fighter isn't just trying to get within striking distance. They're trying to run over the pure boxer, force them into exchanges, rough them up. It's the advantage that pressure fighters have over pure boxers. That's the advantage that Christina Linardatou had over Alicia Baumgardner many years ago. Many years later, Alicia Baumgardner has continued to maturate as a fighter, maturate as a boxer, and I dare say that Alicia Baumgardner, this loss made her a better fighter. I think it did. That happens kind of like how Canelo Alvarez's loss to Floyd Mayweather made him a better fighter, moving forward. Up until that point, Alicia hadn't seen that kind of aggression and athleticism before. Athleticism in particular. She hadn't. Until that point, Alicia Baumgardner was always the more athletic, stronger fighter in the ring, up until she shared the ring with Christina. She now has those experiences and those rounds to draw from. She's not in unfamiliar territory anymore. It is true that pressure fighters, more often than not, they have a stylistic advantage over pure boxers. But you know what else is true? What else is true is that rematches are often won by the fighter that can make adjustments. Pressure fighters stay pressure fighters through and through. They don't change much between fights. They don't really make very many, if any, adjustments. Pressure fighters, the tried and true characteristic of pressure fighters is that they stay pressure fighters. They stay in character. They don't change much. In a rematch situation with Alicia Baumgardner, it would actually be Alicia that is the more adaptable fighter, the fighter more capable of making adjustments in a second fight. Win, lose, or draw with Michaela Mayer, I would actually like to see Alicia Baumgardner take on Christina for a second time. The ability to make adjustments gives Alicia an edge going into a rematch, and Christina, she has a mental edge. Because in her own mind, she beat Alicia before, she can beat her again. That's likely what she's telling herself. It's likely. It's the only blemish on Alicia Baumgardner's professional record, and if I'm being honest, Alicia Baumgardner, she's got a lot of fire. Christina Linardatou is one of the only other fighters at or around these weights that I see has the same fire that Alicia has.
Same passion.
The same vim and vigor and confidence.
Don't forget she's got power. She's got heavy hands.
Christina is still one of the most dangerous fighters around. But approximately 5 years after her initial meeting with Alicia Baumgardner, she may have slowed down. When Alicia faced her, she faced her at the peak of her powers.
She's in her mid-30s now, whereas Alicia is the one that's peaking. Alicia is the one that may be at the peak of her powers, approximately 5 years after they fought.
The fight between them, a rematch I should say, it's not about a belt or some belts. It's about revenge. It's about vengeance.
A lot has happened since then, and I happen to think Alicia is a better, more well-rounded fighter now than she was 4 or 5 years ago.
To tell you the truth, I don't really care what happens between Christina and Michaela, because Christina and Alicia have unfinished business.
I would like to see Alicia fight them both.
Fight them both for a second time. In men's junior middleweight news, per a tweet from No Smoke Boxing, Ben Shalom has confirmed on Fight Disciples that he's been in talks with Matt Rose, the manager of Tszyu, to stage a fight between him and Liam Smith in the United Kingdom this year. How do you see that fight going?
This is one of the more sensible and sensical fights out there for Tszyu, that if he can't get Jermell Charlo, this division's undisputed champion, in the ring, what he can do is get some former champions in the ring, and one among them is Liam Smith. Liam Smith had his own fight he was supposed to be having. He was supposed to be having a rematch with Chris Eubank Jr., who he knocked out. It looks like Chris has decided to go ahead and face Conor Benn in the Middle East, leaving Liam Smith without a dance partner, so it's only right. He's got to move on. I feel like this is a fight that could get just as, if not more, attention than the Tony Harrison fight in Australia. I feel like this is a fight that could do equal to or better than that fight did at the gate and at the box office, but word around the campfire is they want to do it in the UK. They want to do it in the United Kingdom. Tszyu is exhibiting all the qualities and all the characteristics of a true fighter, a true champion. He's got marquee value in Australia, but in spite of that, he still came to America to fight Terrell Gausha, and now it sounds like he's going to go to the UK to box Liam Smith. That's what lends credence to the notion that the fight might happen abroad for Tszyu. It may not happen in his native Australia. It might happen in the UK because he never had to box Terrell Gausha in America to begin with, but he still did.
Get himself some of that Sky Sports and boxer money. Tszyu,
I favor him to win that fight.
I want to say that this could turn out to be one of the most fan-friendly fights that you could hope to put on in the men's junior middleweight division, because Liam Beefy Smith, like Tszyu, is a pressure fighter, a mid-range to inside fighter, a slugger, an experienced one, more experienced than Tszyu, a former champion.
WBO.
He's been in there with Magomed Kurbanov, Jaime Munguia, Jesse Vargas, Anthony Fowler. More recently, he was in there with Chris Eubank Jr. up there at middleweight.
This is a fantastic fucking fight.
If they can make it. Tszyu can always elect to defend his WBO interim status domestically in his native Australia, where he's sure to draw a crowd. But if he's actually willing to travel abroad for this thing, go into the United Kingdom, where Liam Smith will have home field advantage.
Boxer can make it worth his while. Ben Shalom, I think he'll pay handsomely to do that fight.
Punch for punch, I think that Tszyu is a stronger puncher than Liam Beefy Smith, and he's certainly a fresher fighter than Liam. But Liam is better than advertised. He's better than he's given credit for. He's craftier in the pocket than people realize.
Good within close quarters.
Tough as old boots, and he knows what he's doing. He's experienced. I very much like the idea of this fight, though I don't want to get married to it. It's almost too good to be true, and in boxing, when something's too good to be true, it usually is.
Gotta face the facts. We have to face reality. The likelihood of Jermell Charlo facing Tszyu in his very next fight doesn't look likely at all. He's been out of the ring for over a year.
Rationalize it however you like, whether you think Jermell Charlo is running from Tszyu, or maybe it's not Jermell at all. Maybe it's the politics, and that's just what his marching orders are, that they've got something else in mind for him. I don't think that fight is going to happen. I think we're very close to the reset button being hit on the men's junior middleweight division, and when it does get hit, those belts are going to be redistributed. They're going to be dispersed.
Tszyu is very close to becoming this division's next WBO champion. Sebastian Fundora, he's in line by way of the WBC. Israel Madrimov, He's in line by way of the WBA.
He's going to be in action this weekend on Bam Rodriguez's undercard. By way of the IBF, Russia's own Bakhram Murtazaliev. He might actually get a crack at the IBF title, a crack at that title. He's been waiting since 2019.
The next wave of junior middleweight champions is already here.
And that's not a knock on Jermel Charlo, who has one of the more complete resumes, if not the most complete resume, in today's junior middleweight division. He's one of the best, but the longer it takes for him to return to action, the less likely it seems to me that he's going to fight Tim Tszyu.
It's just not the way these things are done.
The show must go on. For Tim Tszyu, it looks like it's going to.
Elsewhere in the men's junior middleweight division, Sebastian Fundora, who I just mentioned.
He says, I feel like everybody's almost trying to skip me for a title shot. It's kind of bothering me.
Well,
Sebastian Fundora won a WBC interim super welterweight title in epic fashion nearly a year ago. As his second fight nears since Fundora's spectacular slugfest with Erickson Lubin last April 9th, Fundora cannot say with any certainty whether a victory over a resurgent Brian Mendoza on April 8th will ensure that he'll receive his title shot next. For even a mature, patient prize fighter like Fundora, the waiting game has become somewhat annoying, you know? I'd like to believe that, but I don't even know, Fundora said during a virtual press conference on Monday. I don't even know, so we'll see what's next after Mendoza. But right now, Brian Mendoza's still in front of us, so we're going to focus on that.
the 25-year-old Fundora of Coachella, California, still didn't hesitate when Mendoza was proposed as his opponent. The 6'6" southpaw wants to remain as active as possible so that he can stay sharp while he waits for his shot at all 454-pound championships.
And being honest, I don't know that he's ever going to get it. I don't know that he's going to get it any more than I know Tim Tszyu is going to get it. Though if I'm being honest, I think Jermel is on the eve of moving up. Fundora continued, honestly, it hasn't been a problem, Fundora said. I feel like with how they have their system, I guess, like if you become a mandatory contender first, you've got to fight for the belt first. So I think Tim became the WBO mandatory contender first. So that didn't really bother me, but you know, the WBC ordered a fight between us, him and Tony Harrison, and that didn't happen. Tony Harrison had the option of facing Sebastian or the option of facing Tim Tszyu, and he chose Tim Tszyu, likely because a fight with Sebastian Fundora would look a lot like a fight.
It would harken back to the fight that Tony already had with the very statuesque Willie Nelson years ago, and the fight that he already had with Jarrett Hurd, statuesque Jarrett Hurd, years ago.
Tony got stopped in those fights. He probably took one look at Sebastian Fundora and figured that fight with Sebastian might go the way those fights did. So he elected to fight Tim Tszyu, and that didn't work out either.
Here we are.
So now, I feel like everybody's almost trying to skip me, and that's kind of bothering me. But you know what? My dad tells me to remain patient, you know? We have to tough it out with Mendoza. We're focused on that, of course, you know, and we're just going to keep moving forward as everything's going, I guess.
It's hard to say that Sebastian Fundora is being avoided. I mean, outside of Tony Harrison rejecting a fight with him to fight Tim Tszyu, who's avoiding him?
Sebastian is on the right side of the street to get fights with the who's who junior middleweights in that division, but he's fighting this Mendoza guy, so he's frustrated, he's impatient, but it's hard to say that he's being avoided.
The silver lining is that he, like Tim Tszyu, is in position to pick up an alphabet title as soon as one becomes available, and I think we're on the eve of that. I think that's going to happen very soon.
Just has to stay in the winner's bracket. Stay in position. Maintain it long enough to see that happen.
He'll be in action this weekend.
And finally, men's welterweight news. Showtime's Stefan Espinoza has declared that he is once again very optimistic over Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford, and they are getting closer, but there are still some obstacles before the fight is finalized. He added that the June 17th date isn't set, with July also possible, lending credence to the notion that it's not an April Fool's joke like many content creators speculated. These guys are in negotiations, and they are trying to do a fight in the fight.
They want that to be the next fight.
It's the only fight that makes sense at this point for either Errol Spence Jr. or Terence Crawford. Now, many are seeing this and they feel that they've read this book before, that they're not going to take the bait, they're not going to get their hopes up, and in truth, I'm not getting my hopes up either. Though if I feel that this set of negotiations is somewhat more palpable than any set of negotiations before it, it's because Showtime needs this fight.
They need it now more than ever. Back when they could afford to delay things and keep Errol Spence Jr. busy with other fighters,
They've exhausted most, if not all, of their other options, and no fight at junior middleweight for Errol Spence Jr. No fight that he could have up there has the same profile and backstory and stage that this fight would have. So it is the biggest fight you can make for Errol right now, short of a Canelo Alvarez fight. And Errol's not on Canelo's radar.
What the hell's Canelo Alvarez need with an alcoholic welterweight?
You want to pay attention to the time frame in either June or July. It just so happens that Deontay Wilder, he's supposed to be returning to action in June. I'd wager that if they can do this fight between Errol and Terrence in June,
then they're going to push Wilder's fight back.
and the same is true in reverse. If Deontay Wilder's next fight ends up getting scheduled in June, irrespective of who it's against and whether or not it's actually on Showtime, if it is on Showtime, I believe that would then affect the Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford fight. In that situation,
They might move Spence versus Crawford into July, but whether it's in June or July, it looks like they want that to be the next fight.
and you're not going to do two box office fights on the same platform within the same month.
They're too close together.
Word around the campfire is that Keith Thurman is on standby. They've got him on tap, on reserve, if things don't work out with Terrence. If things don't work out with Terrence, then Errol will then end up facing Keith the way he was originally intended to.
Per that order from the WBC, I told you 2 days ago, the fact that Alexis Rocha, Terrence Crawford's mandatory challenger, who he was so ordered to satisfy, the fact that he's going in his own direction,
That lends credence to the notion that this time is different, and we might actually get this fight between Terrence and Errol.
maybe asking yourself, if we do, where does that leave Keith Thurman?
Doesn't really matter to me, to be honest. Keith Thurman has 1 foot halfway out the door. This is a quasi-retired fighter that's only fought once in
What?
2 going on 3 years?
Oh, his faded glory.
It's the reality of things. Keith Thurman was out of action for 2 years after the Danny Garcia fight, and 2 more years, a little over 2 years, after the Manny Pacquiao fight. He's only fought once.
He only fought once last year. You figure, if the fighter wants to fight, he's going to fight.
He wouldn't leave his career in the hands of someone else and his activity contingent upon the activity and negotiations of another set of fighters. The fighter that wants to fight is going to fight. Tszyu, who we just talked about, is a perfect example. He wants his shot at Jermell Charlo, but if he can't get it right now, he's not going to let that stop him.
You can say the exact same thing about Sebastian Fundora. Keith Thurman here today is not so accomplished a fighter that you can justify the schedule he's been on.
The writing's been on the wall when it comes to Keith for a very long time now, and it's just that a lot of people refused to read it.
Showtime's still trying to do this fight. I suppose that's good news, but a lot of people don't want to take the bait. They don't want to believe it. They don't want to get swept up in this tornado again.
Get caught up in it, getting their hopes up. Can't say I blame them, though as stated, I do feel that this time it's different. The circumstances are different. In Showtime, they can't afford to squander this opportunity. They need to deliver big fights to their platform. Their future in the sport of boxing depends on it.
They need big fights.
And this is one of the only ones they can make on their own without any other promoters involved.
Satisfy who you have to satisfy. Do what you gotta do. But you need to do this fight.